Welcome to another episode of Dying in Grace, the program designed to integrate end-of-life issues in the normalcy of our everyday life. My name is Arlene Stepputat, and each week I bring somebody that's a community resource that has a special gift to share about some aspect of the end-of-life care and aging process and living well. And this week it is my great delight to have Peggy Renker with us. And Peggy is a certified senior advisor with Senior Living Consultants. Mm-hmm. And also someone I've known in the community for many, many years. So I'm very grateful that you agreed to
Thank you, Arlene.
come on the show and share your expertise. So the first question that our viewers might want to know is, what is a certified senior advisor? What does that mean?
Well, basically that is a certification process that I completed and is an ongoing process where I basically am educated on various components of senior care, health, social, financial, and it keeps me, up to speed on, things that are trending, and so I attend a lot of classes and just for my education, really. So it's fairly ongoing, and it's very helpful to me in what I do.
Well, there's a lot of information to know, out there, and but let's talk a little bit about you. Are you from Santa Barbara? Tell me a little bit about how you got into this field of caring for elders.
Sure. Well, Arlene, you might know I'm the youngest of 9 children.
So I didn't know that.
I come from a very large family. And I absolutely adored my mother, who has passed, as well as my father. But it was really my mother who for the most part led me into this field. By the time I was in my teen years and most of my siblings were, out of the house. Launched, thank you. She always had a passion for volunteering herself, and it was kind of that opportunity for her finally. She had a little bit of free time after raising all those children. So I had many occasions where I was volunteering with her. One of her passions was Meals on Wheels, and I would visit various seniors in their homes, and that was quite eye-opening as a teenager. Many were, shut-ins and, low-income situations. So it was really at that point, really, at a young age, I always knew I had an affinity for the population. And so my father was in the resort business, and I kind of fell into that line of work for many years, but had really started volunteering myself at Meals on Wheels, and then a little bit later, very active with visiting nurse and hospice care, volunteering. And so it was about 2004 that I had the opportunity to open this office of Senior Living Consultants, which is a free placement service that I run. I had the opportunity to open this office in Santa Barbara. It had been running up north, and I was thrilled to do so. I just had been trying to find my way into the business, and have just found it to be incredibly rewarding work on so many levels. And kind of in conjunction with all that, I had cared for my parents who were aging, and my mother was 89 when she passed, and my father was 92, and we cared for them in our home, and we were fortunate to be able to do so. And we had in-home care, and they had very complex medical needs, and so I had a real window into in-home caregiving as opposed to placement, which is what I do now. So that was invaluable to me, because I'm now dealing with families that are, debating, do we leave our loved one at home with care, or do we look toward placement? So I kind of walk them through all that, but that's just a little bit of my history as to how I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which...
Well, that's beautiful, and I love that it's a passion you discovered young and influenced by your parents, and then doing the work in hospice care is also a window into all the complexities that no one really talks about unless you're right there next to the bedside.
No question about it, yes.
And hospice volunteers go through extensive training to be able to handle the whole range of experiences they have.
Absolutely.
So it is a good, it's a perfect segue for the work that you're doing. Because, again, I think it's a kind of calling to do this end-of-life work or, aging work, because it's something that we're all averse to, or our culture is averse to, aging and death and dying and placement. And so let's talk about placement. You said that you were able to care for your own parents at home with in-home support.
Right.
And, most people say they want to die at home.
Sure.
Sadly, most people die in the hospital.
Sure.
That's the stats, that like 70% of people die in the ICU.
Correct.
So if I was in a place where I was looking at, can I care for my mom? How? And I called you. What would you help me think about? How? And first off, your services are free to me. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, Arlene.
Yeah, and that's an important thing for people to know, that your advice would help me for free.
Correct. Believe it or not, people are amazed that we can be a free service, but I just want to quickly explain why that is. It's because we have contracts with all the licensed homes and communities, and they basically pay us a fee when we refer a resident.
Right.
So we get the same fee from every home, and we work with every home. So, but it's really our homes that allow us to be the resource that we are to families that, as we know, are just struggling.
Right.
They don't know where to begin. They don't know, that first call. What am I asking? What am I looking for? What's important? And so we're kind of a one-stop shop in that way, and it works. The concept works because we're supported by the homes, and we also help them fill their beds. Particularly, we have a lot of smaller board and care homes that don't have the budgets to do so. So
Right.
So generally, Arlene, the process would be, certainly doing a physical assessment when we receive that phone call, and getting an idea of what the living situation is and what the particular care needs are. And as you might imagine, the primary issue is often financial.
Yes.
It's paramount. And many of your viewers may or may not know, but all of our assisted living and Alzheimer's care homes are all private pay. So it's an out-of-pocket expense, and a lot of people don't really realize that.
And it's not a cheap out-of-pocket expense either.
Not at all.
So if you were going to go to what's the range? So I have a loved one. I'm placing them in a facility, and we'll talk about the levels of facilities just to help people understand that. But I'm in a facility, not memory care, but just a regular facility. What am I looking at for a budget for my mother?
Very good question.
A range.
Ballpark range. It ultimately will be entirely contingent on the level of care and the amount of support that's needed, and what kind of diagnosis we're dealing with. If we have a dementia diagnosis, how advanced are we? Do we have behaviors? Are we wandering? What are those factors? They account for what type of monthly pricing we're looking at. So Santa Barbara being what it is, very expensive. I would say on the very low end, for someone who might be considered low care, $3,800 and up from there. And we can be as high as $10,000 a month if we have what we would call a full care situation.
So we're talking, it could be as high as $120,000 a year, and your loved one could live who knows how long,
exactly
5 years, 10 years. So people could actually go broke trying to care for their loved one here in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I've had a few occasions where, I've been doing this for over 18 years. I've had a few occasions where I've placed an individual that went in with a good amount of resources and funds, and is still living and thriving and has outlived their money. And because it's a private pay situation, when you get to the point when you're unable to pay that $6,000 a month and you don't have any family to supplement and help, I hate to say it, but you're kind of out the door, and at that point, it's a whole nother ballgame when it pertains to being, trying to get qualified for Medi-Cal, and then we're looking at a skilled nursing placement, because it's only in the skilled settings that Medi-Cal is accepted as a form of long-term payment.
So let's back up and help people understand, because there's lots of different terms that get thrown around,
Sure.
and if you're new to the whole placement thing, you may not understand any of that.
Right.
So you mentioned a board and care. Let's talk about what that is first.
Right. So I guess, Arlene, I would start with the fact that, that there are a number of terms that fall under the term assisted living.
Okay.
And board and care might be one of those. A residential care facility for the elderly might be another.
Okay.
Okay. So those are kind of two terms that you'll hear that are under the umbrella of assisted living. Assisted living would be considered generally 24-hour non-medical care. Okay, so you may or may not have a skilled nurse on staff in that particular community. It just depends. But we have everything from what we call 6-bed board and care home. We really have a number of those. People don't quite realize how many we have.
Right, because they're in residential neighborhoods. They're hidden.
You wouldn't know, particularly in Goleta. So those would be a private home, generally family run, private or shared room, in a good home, 2 caregivers on 24/7. Some homes have a wake staff, some don't. But it's more of a kind of a hands-on care situation in my mind, somebody that needs a lot of maybe
assistance.
A fall risk. And then you have more mid-range places that maybe someone doesn't quite need as much oversight. Maybe they appreciate more activities and having more stimulation and activities available. And then you have larger communities like the CCRCs, which are the continuing care retirement communities.
So they have levels of care, right? Where somebody moves in. Those are the commercials you see on TV. People are having in the dining hall and playing
exactly
tennis.
right.
And so they move in almost like, this is my retirement home, but you don't own anything. You buy into the
Correct.
system. And then and correct me if I'm wrong, as my level of need increases with age, then I might move from independent to assisted to maybe memory care.
Right, absolutely. So those are, ideal if again, there are funds available because they want you to generally come in via independent living, and there would be an entry fee and then a monthly fee. But once you're in, you can age and age in place truly on the more of kind of a campus-like setting, but that's probably one of the more costly ways to go when it comes to placement. And also, it's those individuals that do a lot more pre-planning, are a little more proactive about it. The majority of my calls, as you might know, are more crisis calls. Right. Dealing with just people that have not. They've really not dealt with it. There's so much resistance around it and denial, and
or a health crisis emerges, and they were healthy one day, and now they have a stroke.
Absolutely.
So the life they had, or there was a car accident or something.
Absolutely. So, but unfortunately, and I try to do a lot of educating in the community for people to try to get ahead of it and to start doing research and doing some due diligence on what is viable, what can I afford, what do I like, because at some point also you lose the ability to make that decision. It's being made for you. So, but it's a tough conversation because, as you said earlier, people, and I appreciate, I will want to remain in my home. Right.
So what do you tell an adult child who's got an aging parent, and they can see, mom and dad have lived in their home for the last 55 years. They got married there, they had their kids there. You see that they're not able to sustain it. They don't see it. How do you start as a child to have that tough conversation with your parents? You got any tips for opening the door on that conversation?
It's extremely challenging. I mean, obviously, but it really has to be done and needs to be done, and that dialogue needs to somehow begin. And whether it's, starting with, hey, let's go to lunch at Valverde, let's go have a meal, let's just kind of get a little bit of a feel, open a little bit of a door to the community. Maybe they've got friends that live in one of the communities, and hey, well, Mrs. Jones is at this community, why don't we go visit her. But it just takes a lot of courage for these children to confront it, because it is not something that many are willing to consider. And I really, it's a process, and so it's just a constant, just kind of keeping at it, but begin it and start getting them out and about and deciding what would be their preferences, and again, most importantly, what is affordable.
Right.
What is going to be doable when and if the time does come, because we know.
So what if there isn't much money around? So most elders get Medicare, which it really isn't very much. That's their health stuff. So that part is handled, but they may have some retirement, or hopefully people have some kind of resource. They're living on Social Security, something. But they don't have enough. What happens to that person who goes on Medi-Cal? So now they're on Medicare and Medi-Cal because they just don't have any resources. Are there places that they can live in this town?
We have no low-income assisted living options really to speak of, but what I just want to again make your viewers aware of, we work not only in Santa Barbara but all the way up north into Santa Maria, Lompoc, Solvang area, and in particular.
So the whole county.
The whole county, yes. But in particular, the costs up in Santa Maria are generally half, believe it or not, the price of Santa Barbara for placement. So often we're placing a lot up in that area because of affordability. If someone is just living on, again, as you say, Social Security, and family can supplement, a certain amount every month, we have to often leave the area, and that's, and this is terribly tragic for our seniors who have known nothing but living here, and they have their doctors and their network here to uproot them. But to answer your question, fortunately we have Santa Maria to place, and we've got some lovely boarding care homes up there. I also have agencies down south that I work with that it's more affordable in that direction as well. So there are other areas to consider, and or looking toward a placement in a skilled facility that takes Medi-Cal, and we have 3 of those basically in town that accept long-term Medi-Cal as a form of payment. So that's often what we see, and because of the way the system is set up, it's certainly in our county, there are pilot programs being run up in LA and also Northern California, where they're testing Medi-Cal coverage in an assisted living home. Okay.
Oh, okay. So, they're trying to see if they can make it work.
Exactly. So that has been fairly successful to my knowledge. So we're just waiting for that to hit our area. So maybe we'll have a couple communities that, or boarding cares most likely, that would take someone that's just living on, $1,000 or less a month, and they need 24-hour care, but they're not a skilled candidate. They don't necessarily need to be in a skilled hospital, but because that's the way it's structured.
Help people understand what that means. If you need a skilled nursing facility or a SNF, you might hear people say, what is that?
Right.
What's your level of care there?
Well, majority of people that are in those settings have typically more acute medical needs, and they need the oversight of doctors and nurses around the clock. So they may have feeding tubes, they may have wound care that's being dealt with, they may be diabetic, needing 3 shots a day. So those particulars would push someone into that type of setting, because a lot of those that I've mentioned are prohibitive conditions in an assisted living home. So again, that's all of what I try to kind of narrow down for families when I do an assessment and say, okay, well, here's what are the diagnoses? What are we dealing with? What are the finances? What do we have? And then I try to narrow down accordingly and say, okay, here's what we have. And as we say, maybe we don't have any options locally, and you know.
Yeah, and
so it's
the other thing I'm thinking of is, as we know, the 65 plus population is in the silver tsunami.
No question.
And I'm wondering if you, looking down the road, see that there's going to be a housing shortage for us. That they're not building things fast enough, that there will be not only affordable, there just won't be beds. Do you think that that's coming down the pike, or is it developers getting ahead of the curve?
That could be the reality. I just think it's more just a complete lack of education. I hate to say it, with a lot of the baby boomers. I mean, many baby boomers I speak to believe that Medicare is going to take care of them in the end of their days, and Medicare does not cover assisted living placement. So you just have a lot of kind of, I'm sorry, but uninformed, and everybody's living their lives and check to check, and everybody's trying to stay alive. But I think there just needs to be more education around that it is going to be out of pocket when the time comes, when you're ready to move into a community. I think we've had a lot of building in the last 3 to 5 years, you might know, in the area. Right. I think we might even have a slight excess of beds right at the moment, and I'm pretty much on the pulse of that. But again, that will likely change. But it's just hoping that when the time comes, that they have saved up enough money to afford to move in a community that does have some help for them, because at that point, if a boomer's ready to move, they likely need a little support. So it's not just going to be an independent living apartment. It's going to be a setting with some care.
Well, and I just think, and maybe you can just comment briefly, we talked about people living in home, and just to help people get a sense of what in-home care would cost, because people go, oh, well, don't worry, we'll keep them here, and we'll just hire people to come in 24/7 or a couple days a week. So can you give people the range of what that might cost to have a caregiver come in a couple more, what's an hourly range, especially if you go through a service? It's pretty pricey.
No question. And really, as you might imagine, the majority of our calls, people would prefer to remain in their homes. So that's always a direction that we're going to pursue. We only work with the established in-home care agencies that are doing the background checks and the screenings of the caregivers. Because we know what's going on otherwise when people are trying to go on Craigslist and finding a caregiver. It's extremely dangerous. Right. So going through an agency, you were going to pay a premium. So I would say anywhere from, on the low end, $28, $30 to $40 an hour. Many of them have a minimum amount of hours. So that's certainly something that could potentially work for a period of time. But when we get to a point, which we often do, where that person may need 24-hour care, that becomes just completely cost prohibitive for most of our seniors in the community. That's $12,000, $15,000 a month, easy.
Yeah. So it's, part of what I'm hearing is that, and it's part of this whole idea of waking up to, this is coming, so do some education, some knowledge. And you have a new tool both on your website, and you have a phone app now, right?
Thank you, Arlene. We sure do. About a couple of years ago, we created a free downloadable app that's available. You can go into the App Store and just search Housing Seniors. And on that app is listed every licensed home with descriptions, obviously locations, price points, current availability, so it's a pretty live kind of thing. We just felt that that was lacking. There wasn't really anywhere, you know, if you're a loved one and your mom just fell and broke her hip and she's sitting in they're sitting in Cottage, and oh my God, what are we going to do? You know, where, you know, there's so many places. So it's a really very informative tool for, at least, as we say, beginning the process of looking at different places. There's also various resources on there, the, you know, Alzheimer's Association, the county, hospice. So it's something I would encourage your viewers to download and have in review, because I think it's kind of really a one-stop shop also with everything on there. And again, it's all free. I mean, there's nothing, again, we're not charging to download it or to view the information. So it is, I think, a very important tool to be aware of.
You know, I think that's fabulous, because it also, you know, people are always on their phones. I mean, they might not read a book and they might not pick up the phone, but they're on their phones.
No question about it.
And to start to get familiar, even with the names of, you know, if you don't know what a board and care is, or you don't,
there's descriptions on
there,
Absolutely.
Or what these places are, because I think it's an important thing to inspect and know where you're, you know, because it's a name and an address and a price, but you have to go see them. And
Absolutely.
And I think what you're offering is so important, because having worked in hospice where people are in crisis on so many levels,
yes,
to have someone like you that really just has the people's best interest at heart. I mean, and I just really, the reason I wanted you on is for people to understand you are a free resource that comes from the heart. It's not like you're looking to make money. I mean, yes, you will be compensated eventually when someone gets placed, but that's not what you're trying to do. And it's just so important for people to look ahead and plan.
Absolutely. That's the lesson, is just the
plan ahead.
Right. Be a little proactive. So thank you, Arlene.
Thank you, Peggy.
Absolutely.
Well, we have this book. You might want to put the name of a loved one in here. This is our book of living love.
Absolutely.
We say to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. So perhaps your parents, because they inspired you.
They sure did. Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Elliot Jacobson and Michael Nicholson as my crew, and I want to thank TVSB for allowing us to produce this show. You can see past episodes on YouTube, Dying in Grace.